Hare Krishna. So I just upgraded this Zoom account to professional mode so I can uh, take as long as I want. And I hope you can join me in the future. This will be live streamed in the future to my, personal YouTube page and also in the Coexist Kirtan Center group page. So I don't know if anybody's going to join me, so I'm just going to go ahead and start the share of the Snyder article that he wrote yesterday. This is called Kash Patel's Plots. Now, Kash Patel, he is a QAnon conspiracy theorist. He's very loyal to Donald Trump, and he's going to be probably one of the completing bricks in the cabinet that the kakistocracy cabinet that Trump has assembled. Kakistocracy means the absolute worst that you could possibly imagine running the government. He has promised to use the FBI, just like J. Edgar Hoover did, to go after Martin Luther King Jr. He will use the FBI, America's law enforcement agency, to go against Trump's enemies. This kind of reminds me of the indoctrination of Prahlad Maharaj. He tried to teach him when he was only 5 years old. He was an impressionable young man, and he was a child actually. But they were trying his Skanda Namarka, the teachers in his school were trying to teach him all kinds of uh, you know uh, politics and diplomacy, like who is my friend and who is my enemy. Kash Patel has actually published an enemies list that Trump has, kind of hinted that he wants prosecuted. And he's even said that Liz Cheney should be, she should know what it feels like to be in with nine muzzles of a rifles being pointed at your head in a firing squad. Anyway, that's what Kash Patel is all about. He's going to satisfy his boss's bloodlust with his retribution crusade. So this is not a very good cabinet, but he'll probably be confirmed very soon because he's already passed the hurdle through the first process of confirmation in the Senate, the campaign or the cabinet, whatever they call that, the preliminary phase of voting, and he passed through that. But this is an article from the Substack of Timothy Snyder. He's a Yale professor from Harvard, or no, Yale professor uh, who wrote best-selling New York Times best-selling books. The one on tyranny is most famous, and Rachel Maddow always carries like 9 copies in her purse so that she can just pass it out to people. It's so important. Uh, so one of the first chapters, the second chapter, I believe, is um, don't obey in advance. That's one of the 20 lessons from the 20th century. The people you tend to, in a dictatorial, authoritarian government, they obey in advance, do what the dictator wants them to do, just like my own uh, senator right now is bending the knee to Trump in order to get reelected. Doesn't care about, he cares more about his position in the Senate than he does uh, any kind of caring for, principles or his constituents. So here's Timothy Snyder's book or piece that he wrote in his Substack, published yesterday, February 18th, 2025. I'm not a historian of the FBI, but I'm pretty sure that no one has heretofore made the case to direct the organizing by writing children's books. In Kash Patel's contributions to the genre, he portrays himself as an all-knowing wizard, foiling sinister conspiracies against King Trump. I don't find this laughable. I find it sinister. Much can be said about Patel, who the Senate will now be considering in confirmation hearings. The circumstances of his nomination are quite unusual. He has no qualifications. Unlike previous FBI directors, he's never held office, a prior office that requires Senate confirmation. FBI directors are meant to serve 7 terms, so that Christopher Wray, nominated by Trump in 2017, should still be in office. But knowing that Trump was planning to fire him, Wray resigned. Patel is a loyalist who Trump has promised to pursue, a loyalist to Trump who has promised to pursue Trump's enemies. The United States is in the midst of a regime change in which Patel, if confirmed, would be useful. In general outline, the idea is to make the government as a whole dysfunctional while preserving the parts of it that can intimidate and oppress citizens. The FBI, as the chief national law enforcement agency, will have to be transformed. The enforcement of the laws will no longer be desired, at least not in the traditional sense. In a country where all are equal under the law, those who govern can also be held accountable. Patel has made this clear in numerous interviews and in his book for adults that he sees Trump as above the law, others as suspects in a conspiracy, and himself as the savior. The plots of the children's book bring this home. America is a monarchy and Trump is the king. The efforts of the people to do anything aside from celebrating the monarch and his beauty and worthiness are deep state conspiracies. In the book, the plot points are quite specific and the characters are not disguised. The Russians did not help Trump. Trump won the election of 2020. And in 2024, Biden and Harris used the Department of Justice, presented as a tame dragon motivated by food, to persecute Trump and to prevent him from returning to kingship. In all of this, Patel is the distinguished wizard and corruption combatant, end quote, and all-knowing mage who foils the plots of the evildoers and shines in his loyalty to King Trump. The children's books are revealing in 3 ways. The first is that Patel sees politics in terms of his own special capabilities or abilities, his loyalty to Trump and the evil of anyone who dares to interfere with their special relationship. The second is the definition of law enforcement as a tool of political power. The third is the celebration of fantasy, particular and general. It is a bad thing, of course, that Patel tells American children big lies in his book. But the deeper issue is the proximity of big lies to persecutorial power. The fantasy of the children's books is being forced into real life. We already know that FBI agents are being screened for their willingness to affirm the fiction of Patel's children's books. They have to affirm that Trump won an election that he lost, and also affirm that the people who tried to overthrow the American constitutional order in January 2021 are heroes. We have also seen that everyone in the FBI connected to investigations of Russia have been targeted for firing. This is in accordance with Patel's idea, expressed in his children's books, that the connection of Trump with Russians was a hoax. But of course, this is not true. Russia supported Trump in numerous ways and still does. Regardless of that, Russia is a real country with its own policies toward the United States and its own intelligence agencies. These carry out regular disinformation campaigns against the United States, as well as sabotage and assassination. They target critical American officials in attacks meant to injure them and force them from office. The portrayal of Russia as nothing more than a quote hoax, end quote, is troubling for a number of reasons. Russia is active in supporting specific American politicians and harming others for reasons of its own. It supports the kind of propaganda that Patel promulgates. The overlap is hard to miss. Patel himself was paid by Russians to take part in a film. So, dismissing the Russian realities as a hoax removes from American official attention a country that does harm to American citizens, and it serves as a pretext for a first purge of the FBI, the purge that will likely precede many others should Patel become its director. But the quote hoax, end quote fantasy also leads us away from what contemporary Russian practice and indeed Russian history might teach us. Law enforcement, in the traditional sense, depends on the embrace of facts. There are laws, there are actions, and if as a factual matter that you might do or might not, what you might do or might not violate the law. There are investigations, procedures, hearings, trials, and ultimately a notion of the rights of the citizen or the person. But history reminds us that agencies associated with law enforcement can also operate the other way as instruments of purges. There are two preconditions for this. Their director must see their job as to serve a leader instead of the law, and there must be animating fantasies, big lies that enable prosecution, and then everyone can be guilty. Truth no longer protects anyone. Fantasy endangers everyone. If you do not believe in the non existent conspiracy, you must be a part of it. And if you do not believe in the untrue pronouncements of the rulers, you must be against him. Russia today has a national law enforcement agency, the FSB, that behaves much as Trump and Patel would like the FBI to behave. It arrests very often based on phantoms, notions of conspiracies, whims of a ruler. And in the Soviet history of the 1930s, we see how far this sort of thing can go. The justifications for the Great Terror back then all involved imaginary conspiracies. Their rhetoric was uncannily to Patel. The quote, deep state, end quote, sounds a lot like the non existent, quote, network of networks, end quote, that the NKVD was pursuing in the USSR back then. I find Patel's children's books alarming because they remind me of propaganda fiction from earlier times and other regimes. But it is not just the innocent packaging of a dangerous fantasy, but the details. An enemy, Jewish as it happens, is urinated on by an animal, and young readers are meant to laugh. Patel boasted about this. I imagine that anyone who would tell big lies to small children would also live by them and within the alternative reality they imply. In his committee hearings, Patel dismissed his own words as smears against him, which shows that the wizard has mastered some of the black arts of totalitarianism. As FBI director, Patel would not be able to immediately transform the agency into something like an FSB or an NKVD, but we should not delude ourselves that he has any other direction in mind. Senators who vote for him will have done their part in a regime change. It does not take much to change the atmosphere of a country. The ongoing purge inside the FBI is not lethal, and the first purges it directs against, quote, enemies, end quote, will not be either. But even an investigation can disrupt or even ruin a life. And before too long, the big lies lead to real deaths. I'm going to stop here, and hopefully this will be more than a one guy discussion. But I figure Narada Muni and all the saints and sages are with me, because even though this isn't Vedic literature, I read a lot of Vedic literature, and I'm trying to apply this to the books, seeing things through the light of the Vedic scriptures. So until next week, thank you very much. This will be posted on YouTube and also in my Coexist Kirtan Center Facebook group page. Hare Krishna. Stay safe.